In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, we're going to be talking today about one of my favorite subjects, a subject that I have done a lot of personal research on. That is addictions. We are going to be going through at the end of this video how the devil causes us to fall into them and how God redeems us and pulls them out of them. But first, we are going to start with a very specialized list, ranking addictions and how they fall in terms of their ability to absolutely destroy your life. Starting with weed. This is a hugely popular product today and consumes a lot of people's lives who think that somehow because some celebrities do it, they are somehow going to be exempt from it ruining their life, even though they're making minimum wage and spending all their money on bongs and bags. The long story short is, weed falls into Loserville. I mean, it's just pathetic. It ruins your mind. You can't think straight. You can't cope with reality. You've never met anyone in your day-to-day existence who really is successful, who smokes. What you find is you have some celebrities on the outliers who are basically artist-type people who hit the lotto and made it famous. The everyday person doesn't play around with this. Next, booze. Booze is definitely playing with fire. You end up with one end of the spectrum where it can be completely benign and an equal, normal kind of part of your life. And you end up in the other end where you can end up in the lake of fire with it. I would say for the majority of people who drink too much, they are playing with fire, most of which will just end up miserable and slowly drinking themselves to death on a regular basis, crushing their soul. Next, drugs. Unfortunately, this is the one addiction I probably have lost the most of my friends to. And I would absolutely say that this is in the lake of fire. The point where you're hooked on drugs, it's no longer you who's calling the shots. It's really the drugs. You may be done with the drugs, as someone once famously said, but the drugs are not done with you. If you end up in this addiction, you can be sure that by end of it is going to be jails, institutions, and death. Next, vaping. The Chinese dragon's moisture from hell. There is nothing at all that is, you could say, kind of intimidating or masculine or looks cool. It is exactly the converse of it. And not only that, but like, you know that it's bad for you on such a deep level. There's nothing about it that's being tested. Then you're putting all this junk into your lungs. It's Loserville. It's a very easy Loserville. Next, gambling. 50% of the United States, maybe 60% engaged in gambling in the last year. Of those, 1 to 2% of the entire population is prone to gambling addiction, which means if 50% of the population is gambling in the last year, roughly 4% of those are going to become gambling addicts. What most people don't realize is that gambling addiction actually leads to, I believe, the highest rate of suicide of all addictions. I would definitely call it playing with fire. There are people who are able to gamble and lose some money. There are people who are able to stay within their means, but goodness gracious, if you go into a casino, it is a little taste of hell. Sex addiction, the dating culture, the hookup game, all of those things that we find ourselves in. This is an easy one. It is the lake of fire. Any meaningful life for a man involves a life that is interpersonal in nature, and primarily it involves being with a wife and cultivating a family and having children and doing something meaningful for your existence. If you sleep with a bunch of women, every single study shows that you're going to be prone at a much higher rate to divorce. Why? Because you've set yourself up for it. If you can't go from just living this kind of smorgasbord life to all of a sudden one day settling down and being with the same person, sexual addiction absolutely destroys a person's mind, their body, their ability for interconnectivity, all of that through this one beautiful act that is created for marriage. Shopping, debt culture. I mean, at the end of the day, I would say it just ranks as find something productive to do. Find something to do with your time that doesn't involve looking at buying crap in order to make you happy. So many people stockpile their house and go through this cycle over and over again of buying stuff in order to chase after some happiness that never comes in a package. At some point, you've got to be honest with yourself and just find something better to do with your time. Psychedelics, opening the third eye. It's playing with fire. That's where I rank this, playing with fire. For some people, they're going to end up in the grip of the devil, for sure, 100%. For some people, they're going to enter into psychosis and never get out of it. I mean, I've seen these things happen firsthand. I've seen people who went on one trip and became demon-possessed, literally met demonic entities that they say entered into their body off of one trip. But, you know, there are people who will take it and will not really do anything with it except just have a crazy afternoon in the forest. You never know. And that's why it's one of those ones where you're playing with fire, but you can definitely end up in the grip of the devil. Overeating, the gluttony culture of America, America's favorite pastime. I just rank this as find something productive. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, you're going to be eating your feelings and not processing, yourself in a normal, healthy way. But there are people who are overweight and they do have healthy and normal relationships with the people around them. It's not good for you, but it isn't completely destructive in terms of the other categories. And so I'd say find something productive, get outside, do something, become the type of person that you like to look at and are, in a healthy sense, proud of. Not pride, but that you know that you've accomplished something and you live a normal and good life. Social media. Next one, social media. All of us on some level fall victim to the doom scrolling, to the incessant, plague of wanting to be distracted. This is 100% Loserville. It definitely screws up your life. It takes you away from people. It causes you to have some kind of ADD. It definitely messes up your dopamine and it messes up your relationships. I think if you are giving yourself over too much to your cell phone, you are definitely in Loserville. You got to find something better to do with your time and you got to find something more meaningful to do with your life. Gaming. Again, find something productive. It's not bad to play video games. I don't think that it's unhealthy. I think in small doses, it can even be a productive or good way to spend time with other people. But if you're averaging 3, 4, 5 hours a night, and this is all your time that you should be connecting with your loved one or your children, yeah, you got to find something more productive to do with your life. Next, the bane of my existence in popular culture, anime. I absolutely hate and despise anime. It is such a time drain for young men who are watching 70 hours of a show that they already know the end is going to be that the guy kills all the villains and rises to the top. I mean, the storylines are so basic, and yet people are putting all this time and energy into it. Find something productive to do with your life if you're going to put 30 hours into anime. Last, grip of the devil. Porn, you are in the grip of the devil. You may not be in the lake of fire. It won't destroy somebody in the same way that acting out with other people will, but it will absolutely give your soul over to the devil and disfigure you as a person. So let's talk about first how this happens, how these addictions take place, and then we'll talk about how to get out of them. Number one, we've talked about this many times. The assault, the initial thought that enters into the person's brain. The enticement, this could be driving down the street and you see a weed shop. This could be a lustful image that pops up on the computer. This could be a lustful thought in your mind. Something like this, an assault. Number two, a coupling where you begin to think about how enjoyable it would be to participate in that assault, which enters into a struggle, this rocky period. Am I going to give over to the shininess of the sin, knowing that it's going to cause real problems in my life, or am I going to fight against it? Which turns to consent. When a person consents, they have decided that the lie from the devil is actually a truth. We talk about this, that this is like the devil is offering you the handcuffs. When you consent to the thought, you're handcuffing yourself. Next, there's a commitment there's the planning to actually commit the sin. How am I going to go about doing it? What am I going to do? What steps am I going to take? And how will I make this come to fruition? Which goes into the commitment, where I actually act on the sin. Now, if I act on the sin and I don't cut it off here with repentance, the sin will become habitual. It will become a part of my life. What the Holy Fathers talk about, sins that are voluntary or involuntary, that is what they are talking about, where it becomes something that just starts to flow naturally out of my life like a torrent that I cannot stop, which is now an addiction. And when we're in the addiction is driving the vehicle. I'm merely a passenger in the car. I may tell the addiction I want to pull over and stop, but the addiction isn't going to stop for me. Lastly, this leads to the downward slope of despair, where I continually try to break free of the addiction and then repeat it. Try to break free and then repeat it. Now, the more that a person loses in this battle, the more prevalent the despair becomes. And ultimately, the Holy Fathers say when somebody has reached the peak of despair, they end up killing themselves. This is why so many addictions, whether voluntary or involuntary, end up in suicide. This is what they talk about in a lot of drug addictions, which is it's a suicide installment plan. It's somebody rolling the dice every time they buy dope off the street and they don't know if they're going to get a bad batch or not. So how do we combat these stages in order to not end up dead or in prison or in a psych unit or in a rehab? Number one is prayer, specifically the Jesus prayer. This can never be overemphasized enough. In these first stages, assault, coupling, when I start to look at it, when I begin to think, oh, I should be struggling, I shouldn't be thinking about how wonderful this is. Before I get to consent, I want to be in the Jesus prayer. I need to be fighting those initial bullets that are being shot at me. If I don't learn how to shut down those thoughts at the get-go, I'm going to end up trickling down the mountainside. Now, let's say I get into consent, I start to plan, and I get into commitment, and I want to start to follow through. This is where I need to call. This is where I need accountability. I need people around me who know and understand my struggle, and I need to tell on myself. I need to tell them, hey, I'm sober X amount of days, but I really am feeling like giving in. Help me out, talk me through, do something with me, give me an out today. And last but not least, if I end up in the addiction, despair, in this cycle, I need to find a priest. I need to go to confession. I need to start working very intensely on my spiritual life. I need to make sure, of course, if I commit the sin one time, I'm in confession. But especially if it's become an addiction and despair, I need this experience, the priest absolution, so that I can get out of this and destroy the despair and understand that God is graceful and merciful to me. I pray, brothers and sisters, that if you are finding yourself on this tier list or in these problems, you understand the steps on how to get out of them and the spiritual medicine that the Orthodox Church offers in order for the healing of both your soul and your body. God bless you. Friends, welcome to the new YouTube studio that we created in my house. The only thing that's missing are accessories. We need artifacts, items that will accentuate the space, Gothic and ancient feeling. If you have something that you think would be awesome, send it down to the P.O. box provided below.